Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to continue our series of expectations, which is where we take two players, one from the offense, one from the defense, talk to a local guest analyst, and have them give us their thoughts on the player, and then we each talk about what would be a good and a great season for these players. Tonight, great guest for you, Pete Gilbert from WBAL. Pete, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ken.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate you dropping by on draft night. And your foot doing a little better?
I tell you, I'm out of the boot. I'm walking around without a limp. About another 6 to 8 weeks away from the basketball court. So all is doing well.
That is good. That's really good to hear. It did not go quite as smooth for Maureen, but good to hear it.
Fortunate.
Well, let's talk a little bit about two players today. Justice Hill will be the first we talk about. We're going to talk about Marlon Humphrey as well. But Justice Hill now entering his fifth year, back and signed on a 2-year deal with the Ravens. He did miss an entire year due to injury, but player who seems like he's been around forever, but he won't turn 26 until November.
Right. In a league where it's you have so many guys coming into the league who are old because they had all these extra years for COVID and transfers, this and that. There are still some young ones. Patrick Queen, awfully young, heading, after, in his fourth season with the Ravens, he's 25, 24. Mm-hmm. And Justice is a young guy again too. And Hill was again the fastest 40 time in the combine for a running back when he came out back in 19. And still waiting for him to see what he might be. He never really got a whole lot of a chance to shine, but every time he averages 5 yards a carry basically for his career. And we don't know how well he catches the ball. He caught it well in college, has not had much of an opportunity to do so, but no running backs have. One as far as, in what we saw in the Greg Roman offense. I'm curious to see if that changes, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. He's caught all 17 balls thrown to him in the last 2 years, but only for 4.6 yards per reception and target. They're the same number because he caught every ball. But it's really a strange thing. You mentioned that there's not a lot of opportunity there. I completely agree because Lamar is his own check down. So it's not like the Flacco to Rice, continuity of getting 50 catches a year on checkdowns. It's probably slightly exaggerated, but a lot of catches per year for Ray on checkdowns. Lamar wants that area cleared out. He wants to play with that space himself and take off from the pocket. And there's just not the same need for a running back who's like that. And I agree with you. I think Todd Monken may change that.
And I think Lamar's made clear that he wants a different approach to it. He wants to stay back there and throw the ball. He definitely does not. I mean, he's going to run. He's going to scramble. But he does certainly, when it comes to the run game, clearly does not want to be a huge part of it. So where does kind of role does that leave for Justice Hill? He's been tantalizing at times. You go back to his rookie year in week 17 when they locked everything up and he gets the start against Pittsburgh and ran like a madman. A fantastic game in the rain and the downpour and ran so hard and tough. Just you're like, all right, there you go. Then, you have the 2020 injury or 2021 injury. It feels like he's never every kind of one step forward, 2 steps back. He had some other little dings here and there. And when you're their third guy with Gus and JK, you're not going to get a ton of opportunities, but we're just still kind of waiting to see what he might be. And he's not dazzled, but he's been good with the opportunities so far. If presented with more, I think he could do more.
Yeah, I very much think so too. And the last couple of years now, the Ravens went with this veteran running back by committee group when they had the injuries, picking up all of these older guys, and none of them worked out. Le'Veon Bell and Freeman and
Latavius Murray.
Yeah, all of them. And none of them worked out. And what they really needed was a good edge speed threat. And I thought that Hill was going to be that guy because he's, good yards per carry rush. They can afford to have him on the field on third down, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But if the offense is going to be designed at a sidecar, one running back to one side of Lamar, that running back's primary job is to stretch the field in the direction opposite where he lines up. So he's going to cross in front of Lamar, potentially get a mesh point handoff, and create opportunities, frankly, for Lamar by making the defense run themselves out of position. And Hill is the kind of guy who could do that. Just they haven't used him in the mesh a lot, which means I think that they probably do not completely trust him there. And I don't know if that's been fumbles in practice or what it's been, but I love your perspective on that.
So Lamar. Justice has not shown an issue. I don't think an issue with. He's had every running back has the ball get on the ground occasionally, but he has good hands. I don't think in talking with the coaches through the years, hands have never been an issue with Justice Hill. They're trusting him in that. I just think that they preferred to have that be done with JK, with Gus. Those. Not necessarily for the speed, but they felt those were bigger hitters. Those are good backs. It's not like he's sitting behind guys you're like, he should be starting over them. So I think it comes down to, again, the opportunity. They just say, we haven't needed you for that. And it lined up so poorly for him when the two guys in front of him get hurt. So did he, what a year that have been if he was a number one. Instead of having to go with this committee of veterans who were, at the end of their career, if you'd had a fresh Justice Hill, it could have been an explosive kind of year. Unfortunately, we don't know. And that was such a snake bit campaign.
Just to go back to what I said before, it's not always that the guy's going to fumble the ball in the mesh point. So I know that was kind of the implication by saying they trust him. Sometimes it's a matter of having a long enough period where you can still give the ball up. And Mark Ingram was the master of it. He was perfect for pistol. They put the ball in the mesh, and his comment was, pull it out as late as you want, just pull it out hard. And Gus Edwards even had some troubles with the mesh point in 18, and that led to a fair number of balls on the ground. Some of the veteran by committee stuff, my theory was that it was mesh point related, that some of the speed backs they had just weren't mastering it the same way some of the bigger armed power backs were. Could create that box for the football, still let Lamar pull it late, still have the confidence they could pull it in high and tight, weren't looking for every little crease at that time and losing focus on what was happening with the mesh. So it is a delicate thing. And obviously a lot of Lamar's value is tied up in that process working very smoothly. But I don't know what wrong with Hill, because you went back to his 2019 finale against Pittsburgh when he ran with all sorts of power. We've almost seen more power from him than we have from speed at times.
Running inside, he's so low to the ground. His legs are very strong, and he was able to carry guys going forward and break tackles inside. So again, that's where it feels so tantalizing, because he has the speed. Mm-hmm. And then he clearly has the power to go with it as well. So I think more than anything, it's just been a lack of opportunity is the reason that he has not had been a more relevant player. And, some of that's due to injury. Some of that's just due to the guys ahead of him. And, so now you've got JK coming back, we presume healthy. Mm-hmm. Gus, you presume will be much closer to what Gus did never looked healthy last year, even when he got back on the field. But I think you can, you get that full off season. It would be hard to see a whole big reason you would see a huge year for Justice Hill. I think it would take someone else getting hurt or someone putting the ball on the ground. That's one thing we have seen. You can get into the doghouse fairly quickly in John Harbaugh's locker room if you don't take care of the ball.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's also true. Minor injuries happen at the running back position. It's one that takes a lot of hits. People miss time, even if they're not for a long time. One of the really interesting players this year, I think, in camp is Keaton Mitchell, and figuring out what he'll do, because he's the fastest of all of them. And seeing if he can, learn quickly or adapt quickly to the mesh. And the meshes Jackson wants to play, because everybody's played some mesh in college. It's just is he going to be able to get is Jackson going to be able to get the late pulls that he wants to get out of that? Mitchell, big time home run hitter.
Mitchell it's not just the speed, it's the change of direction speed with him that is watching him go through, just do some footwork drills, and just the stuff they have you out in the OTAs. You're like, oh, that looks a little different. That's pretty special. Okay, good to see. Then of course the other factors come into it. How are you in pass pro? Do you understand? You really grasp the language and the knowledge of the offense, because if you can do those things, then you'll have an opportunity, and will you take care of the ball? But he has certainly some physical tools no doubt above that. So there's certainly guys that are a possibility, but we talk about the mesh so much. I just wonder how much with Todd Monken is that still going to, how relevant or how big a part of the run game is that going to be? Because again, I don't think Lamar's made pretty clear he doesn't want to be part of the run game. He'll scramble. I mean, and there's going to be some, but not the way that it has been. Whereas he would get maybe 8 to 10 designed runs a game when in a fully healthy kind of thing. That may be down to 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. And then you're maybe not using a mesh as much. So it's more straight handoffs, more tosses, that kind of thing. And that maybe then brings justice in if there is a trust issue at the mesh point. I'm not sure that there is or was. I just think I tend to think he just got stuck behind guys that were a little bit better than him, a little bit bigger home run hitters, and just kind of waiting for his opportunity. But it is interesting that they signed him to a 2-year deal. It's really a 1-year deal. Yeah. I mean, it's a $500,000 dead cap issue if you cut him next year. So it's really, but you did bring him back. And, when you could have just let him walk, particularly when you know that running backs are is low value or so easy to come by, right? I mean, when you feel like you could maybe draft an Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round, that's just, you're even spending the $2 million on him, 2 or 2.5 or whatever it is for this year is, I think it speaks to him for a guy who's your number 3 running back.
Yeah. I was really shocked that Mitchell was available as a UDFA, but it does really speak to how teams value the position. And I hope this is one certainly that works out. I think Hill is here as much for his special teams as he is for what he does on offense. I think one thing we really haven't talked about too much is what Hill provides in the passing game as a pass protector. And he's been relatively good in for a team that hasn't had great pass blockers across the board at running back, and for other reasons, wouldn't necessarily want a player like Edwards on the field on 3rd down. Hill has been pretty good at that.
He is. He's not afraid to step up and meet the moment and take that contact and really stand strong to it. It goes back to the way, again, it makes sense when you watch him run the way he did in the rain against Pittsburgh. He's not going to shy away from that. And then it comes down to just understanding what your assignment is and where it's coming from and be prepared for it, which he is. And then you add in, of course, the kick return ability. Mm-hmm. And, there's certainly, if you don't want Devin Duvernay back there for it, and it'll be curious again, because they just keep seeming desperate to get rid of the whole kick return as a play in the NFL, which is, I understand it all. Yeah, let's make it safer, but let's add more games. It's kind of this, all seems a little farcical in that regard. Let's have you can now flex to Thursdays. Sure, that'll be fine.
That's a terrible safety. Terrible idea. Such a terrible idea.
I couldn't agree more.
And I of the rule changes, we did a show on the rule changes when they first came out, and this was when they were proposed. And usually the competition has mostly ones that'll get accepted, and then a couple that are just crazy ideas by someone where there's obviously just an agreement. I'll tell you what, just let the owners vote on it. We don't want to argue with you anymore. Of the people on the competition committee. So they have this ridiculous one about the fair catch on the kickoffs. And I thought, no way in hell is that going to be accepted. It just doesn't make any sense. And I guess there are still muffs on that. If you muff the ball, you probably, you have to take it at the yard line, you pick it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but it just, to legislate the play out is, if you're going to do it too, by the way, just quit painting around with it.
Yeah.
If that's what you want, fine, do it. But the kick return, and they did make it safer, and there are ways to make it safer. And the concussions, were reduced by changing the wedge and how they went about that. So okay, it's still football.
Yeah, you do,
right?
You have to do some of that.
It's still football. So let's let them play football. I think that's okay.
You ask any of the players who are out there, and a lot of the guys on radio talk about this. He just says, all I can say is it was really cool to be able to run 30 yards down the field on a kickoff and hit someone. I thought about how lucky I was when I was doing it, kind of thing. This is the kind of thing Ross Tucker or other guys who would say who are on the air, and it's they love doing it. We love seeing it. At some point, you gotta still have some contact in the game, and it's more honestly. I think there's some there may be an overstatement of just how dangerous that is, but they could come up with other gamesmanship angles that would make it a more reasonable choice play. Like if you take a fair catch inside the 20, it's at the 20. If it goes in the end zone, it's at the 25, and then there'll still be the incentive to pooch, and there'd be opportunities for. I mean, you could just there's more ways to make it interesting.
Yes.
Still. Yeah.
And much to the credit of John Harbaugh, he and his crew tend to try and come up with as many of them as possible to keep that play in it. They just, as John says, they don't like to listen to me.
Yeah, Tucker could put the ball through the end zone whenever he wants. As we know,
right.
But yeah, he loves to pooch the ball down at about the 4-yard line if he can.
And it's funny that I sit in the games next to Keith Mills, and every time the ball's pooched, he starts yelling at him. He just wants it in the end zone every time. It's like, you're just gonna give up a big play. What are they doing? Well, now they have the ball to 15, Keith. All right, it worked this time. All right.
Big plays usually work against the receiving team, because they get the holding calls and they get the fumbles.
I know.
So anyway, it is what it is.
We digress.
One more thing I want to go back to about Hill was he's one of these rare receivers. First of all, does not have a lot of yards per route run career. I'll get to that in a second. But his ADOT is minus 1.9. His average catch is 1.9 yards behind the line of scrimmage, right, which means his yak is greater than his receiving yards. So he actually is one of those guys. But the kind of the troubling number, though, is his yards per route run is only 0.52. Now, the way I look at it is this way. Your passing offense, in order to be successful, needs to be 7 to 8 yards per pass play. All right. You could probably get by with just under 7, but that's not what you're looking for. If you're looking to be a good team, between 7 and 8 would be, a good team. If you think about it, you have 5 eligible receivers. They have to average between them about 1.4 to 1.5 yards per route run in order to get you to that point. All right. And obviously it's different receivers on different plays, but in aggregate, if you're going to get between 7 and 7.5, they need 1.4 to 1.5 each. So a running back who contributes 0.52 is expected to probably contribute a little bit less than 1.5, but he's got to contribute a little bit more than that in terms of either a catch rate, a number of times he is the target, or be a devastating pass blocker that, he takes everyone out of the play on that play. And just Hill is not really any of those three things. Got a very low yards per target for his career, unfortunately. And that's an area where he needs to improve his aggregate contribution.
Some of it too is the occasional attempted screen that the Ravens have not mastered at any point in the 26-7-year history, it seems. They've struggled with screens, and he is one that has caught a few of those screen passes that have gone for very little. The routes that, and it's funny, you'll see Pat Ricard on a wheel route, and it's not Justice Hill on a wheel route. You'll see, JK on an angle route over the middle occasionally. I'm waiting for that. That's just that. Why isn't 43 getting that play?
Right.
That's where he, just a little quick slant, from out in from the backfield. And I feel like that's, he's so quick that's going to be there. And I just kind of wait for use his speed down the sideline or give me a little bit of that angle route. And I don't know. The running backs have just been so not part of the passing game period. They were just totally almost irrelevant in the Greg Roman offense. So maybe that's why I'm optimistic for some of the things we might see now with Todd Monken, who is certainly willing to and wanting to, throughout his career, spread it out a little better in that regard.
Yeah, I think with Roman, definitely a vertical stretch offense, which means they're trying to look to stretch the defense sideline to sideline as much as possible and puncture a hole through those thin defensive lines at the point of attack. And their offenses were built super heavy in order to do that, but they needed to have the deception and the threat to go to the outside in either direction. And
it's not like Roman had. It wasn't. I don't want to sit and bag on him. In 2019 they had one of the greatest offensive seasons in the history of the NFL. I mean, there were great concepts and great plays, and the constant movement in their run game to the way that they created matchups with Boyle and Ricard crossing. I mean, to have those guys coming at you at the pace and ferocity with which they did was spectacular. And all your pulling linemen, both direct, it was great. It created all kinds of problems and put stress on defenses. But if you're going to talk pass game, it was just when you spend all your time working to be a great running team, they clearly didn't spend a whole lot on being a great pass.
Yeah, and honestly, in 2019, that was just fine. It was the greatest running team that ever was, and they had the offensive line. And the next year, things started to go south on them with the retirement of Yanda, the loss of Stanley at midseason, and that honestly both pretty enormous blows in terms of reducing the effectiveness.
Which nobody seems to want to talk about as a relevant factor into the not the demise, but certainly the decrease in production. And still in 2020, it was still a really good offense.
Oh, yeah.
It was still scored points. That was not like that was a bad offense. But anyway.
Fair to say that Greg Roman's still the greatest offensive coordinator in Ravens history? Kubiak would be the only other guy.
Kubiak would be the only possibility, right? But it was such a brief, 2014, that offense, especially towards the end of the season, was really cooking, and the way that they were to do what they did in New England, and unfortunately to not have the defense to be able to. Gosh, Matt Elam still makes you cringe trying to make a tackle in that game. To twice have 14-point leads and not hold it that was because and why? Because it was a real great, fantastic mixture of the pass and the run. They could hit you both ways, big plays, throughout, and they really had defenses on their heels because of that. And I think that Todd Monken has a good opportunity to bring some of that back in them from what we've seen.
Yeah, I hope you're right about that. The other guy would be Don Strock from the very early Ravens days, and it's so hard to judge because the defense was so bad at that point. It was really hard to be able to even really unleash the offense. Unbelievable no huddle offense with Vinny Testaverde in that first year.
And I honestly, wasn't here. I wasn't covering those teams. I was at that point in Missoula, Montana, focused on the Grizzlies and their efforts in 1AA football. So it was a little different. A little different for me at that point.
I'm sure that was fun. Did you grow up in Baltimore, or did you grow up somewhere else?
Damascus, Maryland.
Okay, Damascus, so close enough anyway. So, running backs involved in the passing offense back in the Burt Jones era, is that too early for you, or did you?
No, Lydell Mitchell.
Sure.
That was my first jersey, 26.
There you go.
So, we had my dad's from Catonsville, and so we had season tickets to the Colts. Okay. And so that was my introduction, was from, I think, first game in 1975.
Okay, and then we had Joe Washington after that, who was
loved
a flanker. Yeah,
oh goodness,
running
so quick.
Number.
And Randy McMillan, who could just his thighs were just titanic, and he could run you over. So they had some fun running backs.
Yeah. All right, so I think we talked about Hill a good amount here, but let's talk about what's a good season for Hill and what's a great season. So I told you, how I do my good and great seasons, but just define it as you will and tell me what would be a good season to you.
To me, a good season for Justice Hill is being productive on special teams again, making a few big plays and not having the negative plays, not turning the ball over, not just really being responsible with some big plays mixed in on special teams. And when he gets the opportunities offensively to take a little more advantage of them, I think he's averaging basically 5 yards a carry throughout his career. So I think that's, you can expect, you would like to see that again. I think it's in the pass game where the possibility certainly exists for him to excel more because he has the skill set to be a much more productive member of the pass game. And on third down, and maybe you mix it up in some earlier downs as well. And if he stays healthy, and maybe some other guys don't, then you might. I think for it to be a great season is going to require J.K. or Gus through injury to not be themselves, and whether that's dinged up and not. I'm not saying full on, they're out for the year kind of thing. But if they get dinged up and you have to spread the wealth a little bit more in terms of plays, then I think that there's a possibility for a much greater component. You could see. So could you see 450, 500 yards rushing? That would be great if you manage to get that at a Hill, and then add in 250, 300 yards receiving, and give me 4 total touchdowns. That would be a great year for Justice Hill.
That would be a great year. I have it defined a little differently, but not much in terms of a good season. I just want him to remain a plus core special teams player. Plays on all 4 units, kick, return, and kick and punt both directions. And his value there is a lot of why he got re-signed. In fact, I think there's a chance that he kind of becomes, even if he you can't lose his place entirely as a running back because you got to contribute something other than special teams. But he's a chance to become that Anthony Levine type player or Albert McClellan, who stays with the Ravens for an extended period of time, being primarily a special teams player. So I think he's got that to look forward to. It's a hell of a way to make a living relative to some other ways out there, as a lot of these guys find out after they get cut, unfortunately. But I'd like him also as a good season still to offer some value to the offense on a rate basis. I don't think it will be an aggregate basis that he's going to get a lot. I don't even think it's necessary that he's the full-time third running back. I think Mitchell could take that from him. He certainly has the special teams value and Mitchell doesn't. But on the other hand, if Mitchell's a really effective running back, it's going to be really hard to keep him inactive on Sundays.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that will be, and then you're thinking, are they going to have 4 running backs active?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like what we've seen in the past. Now, again, they're also not willing to go against the grain a little bit. If Justice Hill is a great special teams player and that's all they're going to do, well, if there's a coach that's going to allow that, it's John Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Right. For his love and respect for special teams, that there would be the possibility for that. But again, I think that there is still the possibility through a skill set that Hill could be a bigger contributor offensively, but it would take some other things happening for us to ever see that.
I'm of the opinion that when you are starting the season with people giving you 54th man roster versatility by being cut, it should be pretty clear to everybody in the organization that roster spots are too valuable to give up to people who are just special teams player. You got to be a special teams player plus the first backup, or a special teams player plus somebody who can contribute in some package. And Hill does fit that description right now exactly. I mean, he completely meets it. It's why he got more money than an Anthony Levine would get. Anthony Levine would get a 2-year bonus of $400,000, and Hill is getting a 2-year bonus to the base of $2.5 million. So right. It's a big difference.
No doubt about it. So I mean, I always liked Justice Hill. Talking to him, he's been a good guy in the community, good guy in the locker room, and those are the kind of people you like to see, have a chance to succeed here in town.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go with a great season. I think I mirror on some of the things. Monken emphasizes his speed in the new offensive scheme as a receiver. He takes his pass blocking up just another notch, a few less mistakes, and he had some of those this year, certainly, so he can stay on the field on third down. And I would expect a decrease in his rushing yards pretty much no matter what. He was about 265 or something last year. I think that'll come down with Monken, but an increase in total yards. And this is an offense that I see as being more transactional in terms of yardage this year. And what I mean by that is, while they were concerned about, yards per play and being effective running the ball, this offense in the whole Greg Roman era was more about being efficient on a per drive basis. And by the way, that is what's really important, but you give up something in terms of big plays in order to do that. In the end, the points per drive are the most important stat for an offense. There's no two ways about it. But hopefully Monken can bring some of that. And I think it's going to be of a more transactional level, that there'll be more big plays. There'll be more opportunities in the passing game, as I'm sure you'd agree.
Will also be interesting to see, because the tempo should be increased. There will be more plays.
Yes.
Assuming you can convert, that you're going to, you're looking at, instead of running, running the play clock down to 5 and coming out of the huddle. The idea that you could get up to 60 plays, 50, 60 plays, as opposed to 30, 40 sometimes you would see with this Ravens offense. And that would be really interesting to see what kind of, how that affects them production as well.
Yeah, I'll be interested in that as well. And I agree with you. With more passes come more incomplete passes, which stop the clock, and you're gonna naturally get more plays out of that. So I would be completely on board with that. So interesting player, I would agree. You ready to move on to Marlon?
Sure, you got it.
So he'll turn 27 in July. Incredible Twitter presence, just very amusing character. In terms of that, I'm sure he's a ton of fun to be around, when you're doing interviews or whatever else it might be.
Marlon is incredibly funny and smart and engaging when he chooses to be. And I say that there are times, and that we see him where he definitely does not choose to be funny and engaging and thoughtful and fun. And that's just, it's the way, he's almost, it's funny because if you only watched his Twitter feed, You would have no idea. There's almost a mercurial nature to him as well. And Ed Reed was more, you just let it out there more about it. Marlon's more protective of that, but it's there. But I also think it's almost some of you almost have to have some of that to be great. And so I don't view that as a negative. And I see, oh, that's a day Marlon's like that today. Okay, we don't need to talk to him. That's fine. He's not good. It's like if Ed had the hoodie up, you're not talking to Ed. That's how he made it much more clear. You have to maybe dig a little more to find out what it's like with Marlon. But I mean, when he chooses to engage, I mean, he is as interesting a guy to talk to and as fun a guy to talk to as there is in that locker room. And he's very smart. And I think his post-football career, in whatever direction it goes, is going to be great as well. Because I think he has a lot of greatness, just period, in him.
That is very cool to hear, definitely. Last year, basically put up another year that's not too much different from a lot of his career. He has different ways to be great on a year-by-year basis, but a 74.5 passer rating against, and that's despite having a fair amount of chase work. And yes, I mean Jamar Chase, but also chasing the other team's good receiver. Yeah, there you go. But 0 TDs allowed in 2022 with 3 interceptions. That's obviously fantastic. We did not see the forced fumble production, but it was at a historic level with 8. He's had 1 each of the last 2 years. Still uses those baseball bat arms after the catch and at the catch point. Not quite as much at the catch point this last year, with only 7 passes defensed, with 3 of them
a career low.
Career low.
And that's a career low. Yeah. And it's interesting, he had in 2020, he had the 8 forced fumbles, which again is just a preposterous number. Mm-hmm. And the other 5 years combined, it's 5. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting. I mean, that goes to the great look. Fumbles are very random. How many times you see a guy make a great play, come in and punch a ball and it stays there? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes almost seemingly no contact forces a fumble. There's so much randomness and just kind of luck to it. And then of course it's a 50-50 proposition of recovery. Yeah. So, so when we talk about turnovers, they do come in bunches, but it's not seem to be related to a whole lot of maybe because you did something better or worse. It's just the way the ball bounced that day. But we do know for sure that when Marlon takes his swings, that's hard on. It's such a conscious thing in receivers' minds because they've seen the highlights. They know if they don't lock up the ball really, really well, there's a good chance he could knock it out. And if you're locking up the ball really, really well, you're not quite as loose, fluid, and free when it comes to total speed. So that's an advantage just before the snap that Marlon has in a lot of guys, and because they know that that's coming.
Now, just to that point there about locking the ball up tightly, it actually makes it easier to knock the ball up a lot of the time when that is. You have to be a little bit loose. And what I would say is, if you don't believe me, work with your son or daughter, whoever it might be, and tell her to, or you, close your fist tight on a tennis ball or a baseball and see if you can hold it away from her prying away your fingers. You are much more able to hold on to that ball if you hold it a little bit loose. And it's something we learned in a management training program a few years back. But it's actually hilarious that this was working. And then I went to a wedding where it actually came into play. It was a Jain wedding. Actually, Jain and Jewish wedding, a really kind of an oddball couple. But they had some game where you had to hold onto a ball, and it was some test of wills between the spouse and between the two spouses of who was going to be able to get this thing. And I was trying to advise my friend about how to hold the ball against
not too tight. Not too tight. That is funny. But all you hear from coaches, high and tight.
There you go.
3 points of pressure. Do not let up. So I just think that that's just kind of a built-in though mental advantage that Marlon has on guys. What makes also him so great is his ability to match up with a number one on the outside, to match up on a smaller, quicker wide receiver on the inside, to be anywhere on the field, to just be a hybrid. He's a great tackler. He's not afraid of the contact on that. He's a good blitzer. And so all that comes together that just he's such a total, complete cornerback. And you think about guys that are taken in the first round, mid-first round like he was, and how many times it just doesn't happen like that for him. And he has outperformed his draft position, I think, significantly, and that's a bold statement considering what was he 17th overall back in 2017.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great pick. And remember, the Ravens didn't need a corner at the time. Why do we need a corner?
Yeah, everyone wanted OJ Howard, right? That was the wrong Bama guy. It was,
You mentioned the two things, but McDonald really has effectively used him as a blitzer. And this is one of the ways, if Marlon is doing a little bit less in some of her turnover capacity, in this case, it was forced fumbles, maybe allowing a couple more long plays, missing some key drives, particularly against Miami. But he did have 3 sacks, and he only rushed the quarterback 10 times the whole year. And
that's a good percentage.
Yeah, it's a good percentage. And PFF scores him for 3 other pressures for what it's worth as well. So 6 for 10, I'll take that batting average. Missed tackle rate, a career best 7.5%. You hit on that. That has consistently improved over his career, something I very much like to see. A lot of that, by the way, with him is not just about his physicality and his arms and locking up. It's being in position to make the tackle better. And really love to see that at him. I also love to see that he holds his teammates accountable after a play. He and Peters both will go after with emoting at the other player who has made a bad play. And I think you need to have that accountability. And it's one thing I really look for on this defense now is body language after the play, telling me who messed up what.
And, it's one of the things, too, anyway, we saw a lot of that accountability being pointed to, certainly early in the season before they seemed to figure things out on the back end a little bit more. And which also, I think, speaks to you've got Marcus Williams, who was a new safety back there, and then you had some injuries, and Jalen Armour-Davis is a rookie out there, getting stuck out there playing, and you had Kyle Hamilton as a rookie. I think a big part of the key for Marlon too is developing chemistry with all of these guys. And now he's got another year to work with Marcus Williams, which I think is key. Another year with Brandon Stevens under his belt. Another year with Kyle Hamilton. All these different guys on the back end because it's not just the guy next to you. I mean, it's that whole secondary weaves together. It's got to be very accordion-like and working. If you're going the wrong way, it makes a bad noise. You got to definitely want to be flowing together on that. My grandfather played the accordion.
I was just guessing from this. Yeah.
I didn't have fond memories, to be honest, of that. To be fair, but it was. Yeah, because I know what a bad accordion sounds like. So you don't want that.
Here's what I want to know. Why does the accordion get so much hate relative to, say, bagpipes? Bagpipes are the enemy to music lovers everywhere. Like the accordion, I can live with it with okay accordion music.
I think that because the accordion's harder to march with.
Right,
the bagpipes are cooler in the kilt if you're doing a parade.
All right. So definitely one of the Ravens' most important players to keep healthy. Their only real star cornerback at this point, Rock Ya-Sin, a physical corner who is not much in terms of ball skills. And unfortunately, that may be a real shortcoming on the outside corners this year. At slot, they've got Hamilton. He has some good ball skills and some ability to be a vulture with the ball in the air. I've loved seeing that and get some tips and do other things that could help the defense underneath.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. And then you got Caillou Blue Kelly, who you go back and look at the tape of his Stanford work, and it's just I'm like, okay, I'm a little surprised at how late he was. I know some of the measurables weren't what maybe you want, but man, he's a football player. He's got the pedigree, and I like that a lot. And I talked to him a couple OTAs ago, and he's just got it all together, and the not just the smarts, but the right attitude with the smarts, and that's exciting to see what he might bring. And I think Jalen Armour-Davis, who really had played some early and then basically got benched late, you had that year to learn. And again, rookie year is just for so many, because you go from the end of your season, prep for the combine, draft, then you're at rookie camp. You're just, some players just never quite make that. It's almost like he hit the wall in training camp. And then got forced to play early, but because you've just been going for so long. The rookie wall didn't come in October or November. It came in August, I think. So, all right, now you had a time to recover, to process it all, to see what he might be able now to do, having a year under his belt and understanding it. In a position that takes so much time to really understand the nuance, how to play it properly. I mean, gosh, it just skill and physical tools just aren't enough. You just really need to understand so much about reading
Oh yeah.
reading the guy in front of you, reading your teammate. There's just so much that goes into it at that position, and why good corners are so damn hard to find. And so I think there's a real chance for him to take a step forward, and he has someone like Marlon from which to learn. And I think it's not a bad thing that he's a Bama guy too. You talk about going under your wing, no doubt about it.
Good possibility there. Let me address the corner position a little bit, because obviously we're talking about Marlon, but the Ravens' depth at corner is one of the really big questions about this team to me. Rock Ya-Sin, I mean, look, he's available and maybe he'll be okay, and that's probably all the Ravens can really realistically hope for, is a slightly above average corner there. They don't have any backup right now that's obvious at slot corner. I don't think Stevens is going back there. I don't think that Pepe is necessarily the guy. Obviously, it didn't really work out in Pepe's rookie year the way they would have liked. Now, again, a guy you're not going to give up on, but Ardarius Washington now has been 2 years out of school. And while he was a high value UDFA, I don't think the Ravens are probably going to be able to keep him entering year 3 with the limited future value that they have under control. And then they've got a whole bunch of other guys they've got to work through in terms of outside corner talent with Trayvon Mullen and Worley, who they made 18 transactions for or whatever it was last year. And, Seymour will be around potentially for special teams, might be a slot guy, might be an outside guy. They have Kelly, of course. Brandon Stevens was a guy I thought was going to stay on the outside. I thought it made more sense, but apparently that's not happening.
Can I take one quick break? My daughter just came home. Sure. I need to answer a question for her.
Sure.
I'll be right back. Yes. You're not going to go. Are you sure? Okay, because I was going to take you. I was ready. I was going to be there for you.
That's why I was telling you, because I knew you were going to take me. So
I don't mind doing it though if you want to go.
No, I just don't.
Okay. I'm doing a podcast.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to that.
I'm back to the podcast. Thank you.
Say with regard to Brandon Stevens and the possibility of him moving or staying at outside corner, where he had some success at the very end of the year. Very grabby early in the year, a lot of penalties. End of the year, he kind of cleaned a lot of that up. Looked like he played pretty well in the Atlanta game and in the next to last game of the year, but before Cincinnati. I'm trying to remember who that it was against at this point, but had played some good football. And now he's moving back to safety. A little bit unexpected from my perspective.
Yeah, because again, he had reps at corner, successful ones, and there just aren't a whole lot of guys, like you said, that have had that. Kyle Hamilton in the slot, he may be your slot corner again, which he almost essentially was from last year when they were at their best. He was, and I think clearly as a hybrid at the very least, he's going to get some opportunities there. If he's there all the time, that would be a little surprising. But Pepe year 2, certainly, again, he's got some ball. He's good, I think, with the ball in the air. He's not afraid to go attack it. He's got no fear about his game, which you do love. But he is undersized, and he's not brilliantly fast to be able to necessarily make up for that. But he is pretty fearless. And again, you get that. I love rookies when they get the second year under him. You get the real off season. He had no surgeries. Coming back, and you get a full year conditioning, because he's actually going to probably put on 5 to 10 pounds of muscle from the kid he was coming out of Houston. So I'm a little more bullish on this group than I think a lot of guys, because there's not much proven back there beyond Marlon at all. There really isn't. But watching them grow and trusting kind of Mike McDonald a little bit, and also to be able to maybe learn as he's learning how to mask maybe some of their deficiencies, and as the pass rush I think will be better, giving them an opportunity. That no corner is any better when they got a great pass rush.
Yeah, there you go. And
so that I think the possibility for that is pretty darn high as well. So I think that this group is going to be better. The backups, the guys that you came in last year and were kind of I think are all going to be better this year. And I think that gives them a real chance to then have a successful secondary.
Oh, let's circle back to Marlon Humphrey for a second and talk about what a good season is. And I'll give you my good, and then you do great and great. So what's your good season for Marlon?
Yeah, a good season for Marlon. Number one, staying healthy, which all but 1 year he has. and durability is a big part of him. So I think you feel like you want to pencil that in, but gosh, if they didn't, it would be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, just to be a good season, he's got to have that, and would like to see, build on the INTs when they come his way. You've had a few go off the hands occasionally too, and go ahead and take better advantage of the opportunities when they come to turn the ball over. But about what he did, last year, 3 picks was a career high. Didn't have the fumble, one fumble recovery. So 4 turnovers. Would like to see that number. That would be good again. You'd like to see maybe a little more, but that's right about there would make for good. And if the standard is to not give up any touchdowns to be good, okay, that would be good again. Probably could allow for 1 or 2. Would be still keep you at a good year. And a great year is when other offensive coordinators are forced to truly game plan around you.
Mm-hmm.
When they say we can't let him be a part of it. We can't let him beat us. And because he has grown more versatile in terms of his ability to blitz as a playmaker, in terms of his ability to tackle, and we know in the forced fumbles, whether in the run game, to just come up and be supportive in that, as well as the ability to go and knock the ball out. I think that there's a real potential there for it. That's where the greatness would be. When you get back to 8 would be forced fumbles, is probably not likely. But but get 4 or 5 to go with 4 or 5 picks, that would be a great year. That would be that all pro, CB1 level that he is capable of.
Sure. I'll go as just say that as a good year. I say his aggregate effectiveness is at the same level as 22, and I'm not gonna dictate how that has to come. If it's more turnovers, that's fine. If it's better tackling, that's fine. If it's some pass rush, that's fine. If it's just being a lockdown corner again and getting more passes defense, that's fine. But I think if his aggregate level of effectiveness does not drop from last season, I think that would be a good season. That's generally true for somebody who's made 4 straight Pro Bowls. Is if their aggregate effectiveness doesn't drop, you're going to be pretty happy with that. A great season, I think he's going to bring together multiple wow factors. And you spoke to a lot of this, but forced fumbles, more passes defensed, another year of pass rush presence, lockdown follow coverage where he's following the other team's top receiver. I actually really prefer to play specific positions because I think cornerbacks often like to play a certain shoulder and whatnot. But I know also that the Ravens could potentially be very weak if other teams try and manage the slot against them. And so they probably will not try to do that.
No, he has the capability to move anywhere, it feels like, on the field and be productive. But definitely the right outside, you just know how good and effective he is. And if you get that same rep over and over and over again, you just know he's going to lock it down. You feel really good about that. And what has also been key throughout his 6 years playing is that he's been humbled. He's been the humbler. He truly has the foundational base. He knows what greatness is. He understands it, and he understands what it takes to be great. And all that combined into this package right now, again, still with a pretty young player, that sets you up, I think, for a fantastic campaign.
Yeah, Humphrey is signed through 26, I believe. Now I've got to look at his contract again here. Yeah, he signed through 2026.
26.
Now, in truth, the option to cut him would come after the 24 season. So at the bare minimum, and I don't think he's going to be cut then. I hope he plays out the whole contract. I hope he gets extended, honestly, given the way he's playing right now. But if the Ravens are into a position where they have to save money somewhere to take care of Lamar's bulging cap number as that grows and has to be restructured and pushed down the road even more, then they might need to consider moving on from a Humphrey. Moving on from a Stanley is definitely a possibility as well in terms of cornerstone contracts. But he's at least with the Ravens for the next 2 years. We should enjoy him as long as he's here, and certainly as long as he's great. And I would say at this point, he's pretty much a shoe-in for the Ravens Ring of Honor. Where are you on that?
On this current trajectory, yes. Okay. If you stopped it right now, I'm not sure. Maybe. I guess, as considering he was first team All Pro, number of Pro Bowls,
4,
probably there. If Todd Heap is going to be there, but again, I think it also goes to what kind of player were you in the community? Were you a face of the franchise? Were you a fan favorite? And he's all those things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's that, which I know that goes in. That's part of the, you know, the compilation and part of the calculus to figure out who is to be a part of that. It's not just numbers. It's not just stats, and he's been more than that. So yeah, I would lean yes. You know, another year or two at this current rate, and it's 1,000%.
Yeah, the most comparable player probably in Ravens history in terms of a guy who was around for a similar period of time, and this would be if he only was with the Ravens these next couple of years, would be Chris McAllister. McAllister had at least one All-Pro year, and he had 3 Pro Bowls, I think, during his time. But he had some other things which were not as positive in terms of that game missing that game at San Diego. Never been able to get a straight answer for why that occurred. Never been able to get a straight answer. It's in 2003. It's been a long time ago. I don't know why, you know, Ozzie Newsome would not be willing to answer a question on this, you know, this far off the thing.
You know, I think at this point it's protection for Chris.
Yeah.
It's just protecting him at this point, and just like, we're just going to keep that one in house.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But what I was talking with Torrey Smith recently, and we actually I met at WBAL 2005, called it Chris's Crib. Every Monday would go and do a 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock TV hit from his apartment.
Mm-hmm. And,
you know, and it was at that time, he wasn't the most reliable for it. He wasn't always there when you were supposed to be there. He wasn't always, you know, and, you know, Chris really enjoyed being a young NFL player and all that could come with that. Now he's finally, Torrey's like, he's got it back together. Mm-hmm. Really got it all together. And it's just been really good to hear. Again, one of those guys, you spend 10 minutes with him, and he's very interesting, thoughtful, smart guy to go along with his great physical talent. And he had some real struggles there for a while, but he seems to have, Torrey was saying, he's figured a lot of things out. So that's good. Which means, again, he'll be a good part of this franchise going forward, which is great for everybody.
All right, Pete, outstanding having you on, talking about these two players. Tell folks where they can talk football with you.
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate again that Keith Mills and myself will be back on the TV side late night Sundays doing Ravens Wrap Up again this year. And it is the favorite thing I get to do in TV. We get a half-hour show that we get to do with what we want. We show a ton of highlights. We do our breakout segments, you know, key plays, why it was a key, why it went wrong, and lots of post-game sound. And we just get to mold it and play with it however we want. And Keith is my favorite person with which to do that. So we do that late night Sunday night on WBAL TV after Sunday Night Football, after 11 news. Look, if you have to DVR it, that's fine. But go ahead and join us for that. I won't let my bosses hear that. They don't need to know I said that, but it's okay. And also,
I'm sure they'll listen to the commercials, even though it's on DVR.
Oh, well, that's a great point. And please on Twitter, WBAL Pete, and come on board. I always enjoy talking Ravens, and certainly at this point, Orioles too.
Yeah, boy, what a run for the Orioles, huh? I don't know if I can still get excited about what's going on, but I am thrilled that the franchise is back to being very similar to what I grew up with, which is always dominating the walk category. To me, it's the leading indicator of hitting statistics. And you mentioned I think at a production meeting, the Gunner is swinging at a few more pitches to turn things around. Well, that's true, and he's certainly hitting a long ball because of it. But those walks, they're going to come back for Gunner because he has a good eye, and pitchers are starting to be careful against him.
You know, what's the biggest thing, and what I love the most about Adley Rutschman is the number of pitches he sees. Mm-hmm. Nobody sees more. Literally, he's the best at seeing pitches in Major League Baseball, and that just does so much. Because first of all, every pitch then is another layer of knowledge in his own brain of a Major League pitch that he has seen. It just tires pitchers out. It frustrates pitchers. It has them leave games early. And it's contagious. Guys are doing it more. When you watch this team losing 100 games a year, they saw the fewest pitches. It was awful. They're swinging at the worst things. Guy would walk someone on 4 pitches and they come out swinging at the first pitch next guy. They're just the dumbest guy.
Are not unrelated. They are not unrelated. And so facts.
Gunner and Adley are very similar in their eye for the ball and a willingness to take, to take it. Gunner had gone too far. He was not swinging at enough pitches that were in the strike zone. And that, now he's increased that and reaping the rewards for the AL Player of the Week.
The Orioles of my youth from 68 to 84, 85 had 18 consecutive winning seasons. Most of that under Weaver, but a little bit Altabelli mixed in there as well. And all 18 of those seasons, they had good teams in a number of different ways, but they outwalked their opponents every single year and by an average of 123 per year as a team. That's 3/4 of a walk per game. And they just ground down opposing pitching staffs during that era. It was great fun to watch baseball that way. It's so much fun to have it back.
And you went to World Series in 66, 69, 70, 71, 79, and 83 because of that. Just relentless pursuit to doing it the right way. You know, they just all bought it. I had a chance to play in Ken Singleton's charity golf tournament recently, and who had a better eye than Kenny, right? He was a big part of that.
Great.
Just so good at that. And he whenever he tells the stories, he just talks about, we were all held accountable to one another about, look, you're going to play baseball the right way. You're not going to play it here. And that meant something, and it was real. And when that is the true belief in the clubhouse, then greatness is possible.
All right. Outstanding, folks. I appreciate you doing your plugs there. I also want to make a plug for the show here. If you want to do a film study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. I'll be always interested to hear from you, always looking for shows to put up for the 6th and 7th show per week in particular. So if you have an idea you want to talk about, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. I'll get back to you very quickly. Pete, thanks again for coming on. Great conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks, Ken.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.